Recently, I was asked to shoot a new beer release image for a beer called Castle. Since I don't have the good fortune of access to an actual castle, shooting on location was out. Compositing with stock photography would be unable to give me the fantasy castle vibe, and CGI would be crazy complicated for a whole castle environment. So I decided to create a castle with AI and bring the can into that environment. As a product photographer, I'm always compositing images. AI just gives me more options, and this is how I use it in my workflow. I started in Midjourney, which I've been using since beta. I prefer it over DALL-E for its ability to have different aspect ratios. You'll see the square doesn't give the same photogenic vibe as the cinematic 16:9 ratio. At the gate, you'll see my initial prompts were giving surfaces and materials that were a little too fantasy illustration. Interesting options, but I didn't feel like it would allow a realistic composite of the can. I began having some luck with the overall scene, but the perspective didn't work to have the focus on a can-sized object, so I played around with the idea of making the surface separately. Still a good idea for future projects, but for this, I just reworded and focused on describing the close-up of the table and used a stein as a reference point. This brought the focal plane to where the can would be, and was an object that would make sense to have in the scene. Here I started to get pretty good options. I also started using an experimental parameter test P that uses only photos as reference images. Better results, but sadly only one variation per generation. Despite my wording of the prompt, Midjourney kept combining the stein and candles, a weird quirk I just couldn't solve and had to worry about later. Here I switched up the ratio to be vertical, more in line with how I might actually shoot a can image, which improved the results a lot, so I started mocking in a basic can shot to find an image I liked. This one didn't work, but this one did, and it's the image I went with and its final prompt. Next, we'll use DALL-E to edit the AI image with AI, and then composite the can for the final shot. Okay, now we have our base image from Midjourney, but it still has the candle problem. First, we'll remove the candle in Photoshop so we can tackle the back wall and top of stein separately in DALL-E. DALL-E, unlike Midjourney, allows editing images, but DALL-E only works in square ratios. So I cropped two sections at the highest pixel dimension that DALL-E would output, so I could just drop it back in without worrying about scaling. The first section was the stein. We wanted to make it look full with beer with a foamy head on top. Here's the crop. We use the eraser tool to erase what we want changed and add a text prompt for DALL-E to fill in the gap. After some experimentation of deleting too large a section and getting weird results, I deleted just the edge of the mug and a little bit above it to get a workable result. I think this was the final result I used, and here's the prompt. For the background, I was getting tons of weird artifacts trying to make it work by only deleting inside the image, so I decided to let DALL-E edit that section and extend the canvas. Here we delete the area we don't want, and we move the output frame over to be partly outside the image. This way DALL-E had to match only part of the image, and it had the other side free to make up completely. That worked better, so here's what we got, and we'll crop off the outside section when we bring it back into the original image. It's not perfect, but we can clean that up in Photoshop. Here's the base image without the candle, then with the back wall comped in, then cleaned up, and then the foam comped in. Now that we have a final backplate that I knew worked, it was tweaking the lighting and perspective of the can in studio so it matched our final castle backplate. Here's that backplate, and here it is with a new studio image of the can cut out and dropped in, and here's the final image with all the composite adjustments. And that's my workflow for using AI in product photography.